Hello, Googleization Nation, and welcome to the Future of Leadership, a GGG Unleashed podcast with thought leader Paul McCarthy. I'm Ira Wolf.
And I'm Jason Cochran. In each of Paul's episodes, we'll cover practical insights, tips, and executable activities to get you thinking about the future of leadership in your organization. Let's begin.
It's time to reframe the narrative. It's time to create the conditions for our leaders, leadership teams, and organizations to have open and honest conversations that matter. I'm Paul Mack from Paul Mack Leadership, just a poor boy from Shepherd's Bush, challenging the way things are done. I've adopted a counterintuitive approach to the future of leadership that's starting to gain traction. What I'm sharing is raw, it's unconventional, but it's always focused on having the conversations we need to have. Today, we'll talk through how an organization can identify, develop, and leverage disruptive leaders in their organization. In our last episode, we introduced the type of leader we'll increasingly need to navigate ongoing disruption, those with disruptive leader qualities. We dispelled some of the key myths that surround these types of leaders and provided some critical insights into the value that disruptive leaders can bring and will continue to bring to the future of work. We showed how identifying disruptive leaders will be critical in developing future leaders and differentiating your organization, as well as why disruptive leaders are important to the future of work, the future of leadership, and the world. Disruptive leaders can bring about significant positive change in an organization or society. They challenge the status quo and conventional thinking. They're not afraid to take risks or make bold decisions. In this episode, I'll be demonstrating the process for identifying and cultivating disruptive leadership traits. By the end of it, you'll have acquired a set of tools that can assist you in optimizing the impact of disruptive leaders within your own organization. If you've been following our work at Paul Mack Leadership, then you'll know that much of our focus is about supporting organizations, about why we need to disrupt the status quo as part of preparing for the future of leadership. That not only includes disrupting our leadership identification, recruitment, onboarding, and development systems and processes, it also means disrupting our approach to the types of leaders we will increasingly need to help our organizations navigate ongoing disruption, and giving disruptive leaders a voice through legitimizing them as well as their contributions to the organization. Simply put, folks, it means destigmatizing them. As you'll be aware from research that I've shared in previous episodes, according to executive headhunters Heidrick and Struggles, the ability to disrupt and challenge has the strongest effect on leadership potential. Disruptive capabilities not only have the most significant impact on leadership potential, but also determine an organization's ability to sustain its competitive edge. You heard me correctly. Korn Ferry's analysis of self-disruptive leaders indicates that our capacity for innovation is closely linked to the organization's willingness to embrace such leaders. However, only a meager 15% of leaders currently classify themselves as disruptive. In an earlier episode, I also shared the 6 qualities of a disruptive leader. Upon further analysis of these qualities, and as a result of my ongoing research with organizations, I've discovered several concrete and pragmatic approaches to incorporating disruptive leaders into your organization. For instance, if your organization lacks innovation, disruptive leaders can drive innovation and creativity within it. They encourage employees to think outside of the box and experiment quickly with new ideas, which can lead to new products and new services. Or how about this? If your organization needs to differentiate itself from its competition, or by challenging the status quo, disruptive leaders can help organizations gain a competitive advantage. They may identify opportunities that others have overlooked, or create new markets. If your organization is in a growth prioritization mode, leaders with a disruptive mindset promote the advancement and the enlargement of an organization by taking calculated risks and pursuing new opportunities. Disruptive leaders have the ability to quickly adapt to fluctuating market conditions and they can pivot themselves and the organization accordingly. Or how about this? If your organization is going through a period of transformation, and let's face it, organizations are always going through transformation, then disruptive leaders can be agents of that transformation. Remember what Korn Ferry said? Disruptive leaders are change makers. And these are the types of leaders that can identify and address underlying problems that traditional leaders may have overlooked. Or how about if you need to motivate, retain, and empower your staff? Disruptive leaders can empower employees by encouraging them to take ownership of their work and contribute to the organization's wider goals. By their nature, disruptive leaders create a culture of experimentation and learning, where failure is seen as a necessary step forward rather than being stigmatized. So I have two questions for you. How can disruptive leaders support ongoing disruption and the challenges your organization will continue to face? And how can you help your organization and others in your industry to perceive disruption as a critical quality in leaders as part of how those leaders are identified in the future? Listen, I get it. You're probably listening to this and wondering how feasible it is to identify, recruit, onboard, or develop leaders who have these types of disruptive leader qualities. Well, I've done the research for you. And all I can say is that few tools actually exist out there that help you in this area. So I've decided to develop a set of practical tools that can support CEOs, chief people officers, chief disruption officers, and their departments, as well as hiring managers and the general learning and development community, to be able to identify and embrace disruptive leaders in their own organizations. I want to talk about two tools that will give you a baseline for identifying and developing disruptive leaders in your own organizations. The two tools are a disruptive leader checklist and an enterprise level disruptive leader maturity model. The disruptive leader checklist is a tool that's designed for organizations that want to identify who their disruptive leaders are on an individual basis. And the second tool is a tool for organizations to raise awareness, to assess their awareness, their appetite, readiness, and commitment to embracing disruptive leaders as part of how they identify, recruit, onboard, and develop leaders. Before we go into more detail about each of these tools, I just want to emphasize a few points because I want you to use these tools in a way that works for your specific organizational needs. Please, please don't take them as they are. Adapt them, add to them, build on them. Even use your own leaders that you're working with right now as part of assessing their levels of disruptiveness. Get them to tell you why they want to be assessed and what they want to be assessed by. These tools are not designed to be one size fits all. They more serve as a starting point for how you and your organization can identify and develop disruptive leader talent. So you remember the research I conducted into the qualities that disruptive leaders have and are characterized by, and how that resulted in the development of the 6 qualities of disruptive leaders? Well, the first tool has actually been developed based on these 6 qualities, and it provides a way of determining how disruptive each individual leader is. The 6 qualities are purpose-driven, enhancer, adaptable, divergent, decisive, and transparent. The tool is not just comprised of these 6 qualities, it also has a range of indicators that help to identify these qualities in leaders. So let's take one quality and its associated indicators as an example. Let's take enhancer. The indicators of an enhancer are that they're empathetic, they're big picture thinkers, they focus on improvement, and they're constantly coming up with new ideas. So when you're using this tool, you're looking for how the disruptive leader demonstrates these indicators that characterize each of the disruptive leader qualities. And then to help you determine how disruptive that leader is, we then use a range of sample questions. Now, I've developed some sample questions that can guide you as part of rating each leader in terms of how disruptive they are by each quality. I'll take one question for each of these qualities, and I'll give you an insight into how we actually assess a leader's ability to be disruptive. Now, normally each quality will typically have 2 to 3 questions attached to it. And I'd actually encourage you to come up with your own questions as you begin using this tool in your own organization. So let's take each of these qualities in turn and the associated question that I would encourage you to reflect on. Purpose. One of the questions I really like here to ask in order to assess a leader's level of disruptiveness is what truly drives them as a leader? And how do you know what drives them? Where's the evidence? How do they demonstrate that? Number 2, enhancer. How does the leader actively cultivate an environment and culture that anticipates and embraces disruption? Number 3, how does the leader proactively adapt their own approach to keep up with transformation? Number 4, divergent. How and when does the leader push the boundaries? And what happens when they do push boundaries? Number 5, decisive. How does the leader face the unknown and handle ambiguity? And finally, number 6, transparent. How do you know if the leader is playing the political game? So I'd like you to take some time to identify your own indicators. They'll use the ones that we've included in this podcast, as well as other stuff that I can send or you can access through my website. Use them here as a baseline and evolve them over time. Or how about this? Work with your own leaders to come up with new questions, new indicators. Involve them in the process and don't do these tools to them. Get your own fingerprints all over them. Empower your leaders. Work together on this. The tool also assesses the 6 disruptive leader qualities using a 0 to 5 rating scale. And again, modify this for your organization's needs and how you typically do these types of assessments for leaders in other areas of their capacity and their capability needs. In this tool, 0 quite simply means that they have no or little capability in the area. And 5 means they're highly capable in the area. And I'd actually suggest that you complete this type of assessment every 3 months and incorporate it as part of the year-end performance assessment process that you have with these types of leaders. One thing I'd really like you to be aware of as you start to use this tool is to acknowledge your own bias. In a previous episode, I discussed a range of biases that we tend to hold, including cognitive diversity bias. And essentially, that's a bias towards those that think differently than others. And disruptive leaders certainly think differently than the majority of leaders. So remember that as you use the tool. Another great way of assessing the validity of the data that you're gaining from this tool is to have an independent perspective from someone else in the organization, perhaps a peer of yours. And what they can do is they can analyze the completed tool and the data from it. Because the real purpose behind this tool is to show your organization the current landscape of how disruptive your leaders are and in which areas they may need to be more disruptive. And by the way, if you use this tool in the intended way, it can inform, guide, shape, and continually review your organization's systems and processes for how you identify, recruit, onboard, and develop disruptive leaders, and for how you embrace them in your organization in terms of how you leverage them. A quick question to reflect on. How willing are you to use this disruptive checklist tool to determine how disruptive A, you are as a leader, and B, how disruptive your leaders are? So let's assume that you are receptive and you're willing to use this tool, not just on yourself, but on your leaders. I'm going to suggest that you choose a leader level in your organization. It could be an aspiring leader, an entry-level leader, seasoned leader. It doesn't really matter. But I want you to use this tool over a course of 3 months and roll it out with one of those leader levels. And I guarantee that once you do that, this tool is going to provide you with some meaningful data, not just on the leader, but on how you actively develop those leaders for the future. It'll also give you some insights on how you work with that leader level and other relevant organizational stakeholders. You can then use that data, that interaction, to develop a plan that identifies how these leaders can disrupt further in your organization and how they can continue to develop disruptive leader qualities. So, this episode, we've walked through some of these tools that my practice has developed at a high level that can actually help your organization as you begin to maximize the potential that disruptive leaders can bring to your organization. But I can't do this alone, folks. Disrupting our collective understanding and our approach to traditional leadership, well, it's going to require a willingness on your part to identify, recruit, onboard, and develop leaders who can increasingly challenge assumptions, who can increasingly embrace innovation, and who can increasingly foster and promote a more collaborative and transparent culture. So the time has come for our organizations to be open to embracing these types of leaders. If you're interested in any of the work that we do at Paul Mac Leadership, and if you're interested in anything that you've heard in this episode, we actually run workshops for people like you, CEOs, chief people officers, vice presidents of HR, chief disruption officers, learning and development departments, and hiring managers that can actually help you familiarize yourselves with these tools as well as other tools we've developed to really make the process to embrace disruptive leaders easier. You can find me in all the usual channels, LinkedIn, or through paulmacleadership.com. And I'd be happy to have a discussion with you about these tools and how they can support your organization as you begin to maximize the role that disruptive leaders can play in evolving your organization. There's been a lot in today's episode, so I really want to just thank you for listening. And I'll speak to you the next time.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and learning about the future of leadership. We'll be back next month with Paul for another episode. But until then, please visit Paul's website for additional resources at paulmacleadership.com. And until next time, don't let the shift hit your plans.